G'day and welcome to another episode of Built by Dan. In today's episode, I'm going to run you through what it took to finish off the installation of the rear suspension on my GT40. Okay, so it's a new day. I slept on it last night, trying to work out how I could deal with this. Unfortunately, it didn't fix itself overnight, but I did head down to my local hardware store this morning and just bought a similar spec bolt. I wasn't able to get the same spec. The ones supplied are a 3/8" bolt, 2 inches long with a UNF thread. Unfortunately, I could only get them in a coarse thread, so the UNC, but it's good enough. Oh, actually, the other thing is that they're only a grade 3 or grade 5 rather than a grade 8. So there's not going to be a permanent solution. It is just a temporary fix so that I can get it mounted up and test fit everything. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm only doing up all these items finger tight for now, just to make sure that it goes together. So that allows me to push on whilst I wait for the manufacturer to get back to me with a solution for the issue that we had yesterday. So I've gone and got all the bolts. They're either just sitting in the different pieces ready to go. I'm going to start with the lower control arm. The reason I'm starting from the bottom, working my way up, is that if I install the upper control arm, it's going to hang down and it's just going to obstruct where I'm working in trying to install the lower control arm later. And I thought that might be an issue. Because I've got this rear stay already installed from the factory, it's restricting the area here for the bolt. So I might just flip that around for now. Doesn't appear to be a set way or orientation for these bolts, but I suppose just a little bit of my OCD. I'd like them facing the opposite way, I guess you would say, so that it'll look symmetrical. Okay, so again, only doing them up finger tight, so that gets those lower control arms bolted on. Bolts look really long, but we'll push on and see how we go. Let's go to the bell crank next. This is a whole combination of washers. So I've got a thick washer on the outside, I've got a thinner washer on the inside between the bracket and the bell crank. So just make sure I keep them in the right order. That'll be right. Yeah, that'll push that in. I can't get the nut on the back there. Now for the upper control arm, the brackets are actually quite wide. I can't even speak this morning. So there are a number of washers that need to go in there to space it or to center it. The manual says that it will need about 4 to 5 millimeters on each side of the bushing. So there's a number of 1mm, 2mm and 3mm spaces here, and I'll just have to go ahead and see what's going to work best. I'm just trying to work that out in my head. 5mm on each side to start with and see how I go. Try and keep it simple with the 3mm and a 2mm. Now this bracket I had a little bit of trouble actually getting installed, even just to be able to put the bolt through finger tight. Now it seems that this bolt is a little bit tight as well. Oh no, it's not too bad. So obviously this isn't going to be perfect right now for the test fit, as the brackets aren't actually mounted in properly. So I could potentially need more, potentially need more now and less later when I go to do the final install. Wondering if I need to adjust that to 4mm on both sides. I think it's just getting caught on the bushings in the center of the rod end. Is it any wonder we're having trouble? Really not having a lot of luck with bolts and bolt shanks at the moment, am I? Basically none of those supplied washers want to just fit over that nicely. Wow, what an effort. But that's one side done. Basically, to get that to fit nicely, I've got 4mm of spacers on one side on the outside and 5mm on the inside. Again, that could change once I get the bracket actually screwed in tight. But it does look pretty good. From where I'm sitting, it looks like the bracket still sits pretty hard up against the chassis frame. That one's a bit easier. Now this bracket definitely isn't sitting right, so we'll need adjustment later. But again, for the purpose of this test fit, I really just want to make sure that it all goes together right, so I can then tighten down those brackets. So there we have the upper and lower control arms installed. I might now have a look at either the shock absorber or the push rod to the bell crank. Again, I've got a number of different washers here for either at the head of the bolt. Actually, I can probably show you here. Got a different washer for the head of the bolt, different washer for inside the bell crank, and then a different thicker washer for the nut side. So just trying to make sure that I keep all them separated so that I know which one goes where. Not sure what I can do to try and push that washer up. Just going to try this screwdriver once again. 2 hands and a foot to get this one done. Okay, now I'm just debating whether I do the shock next or if I do the upright. I think I might do the upright, because then when I install the shock I can probably just lift this up a little bit and it will stop this from rubbing on the upper control arm. Well, that was a lot easier than the control arms. I think I will just go and get some timber blocks that I can sit under there. There's not a lot of clearance there. Between the upper control arm and the push rod. All right. Okay, I've got some timber blocks now, but I've left the suspension, I guess you'd call it at full droop, so it's just sitting on under its own weight without being propped up by any of the timber. And I just want to make sure that I can get this shock absorber into where it needs to go. And that was my concern, is that even at full droop, the push rod is hitting the upper control arm, and I can't actually get the bolt hole to line up with the bolt in the bell crank. So I think I'll have to go back to unbolting the upright, and hopefully that will then give me the adjustment I need to lower that lower control arm and get this bell crank up higher so that I can get this bolted in, and then I'll probably need to jack up the lower control arm to fit everything else off. That's definitely going to give me the travel that I need to be able to get that shock mounted. So might be onto something here. Obviously just making it up as I go. There is no guidance on sequence that I could see in the build manual. I did double check after I had these issues of getting it mounted. Okay, I'll move the camera back around to the other side so that you can actually see how I'm mounting that shock absorber. Can't really see what I'm doing here, but that needs to come up. So keeping in mind that these brackets are still only done up finger tight, so it has got a bit of a play there. So the one bit that I am confident about is the orientation of this shock absorber. So it's got the control knob on the inside here. So basically the transaxle will sit through here, but there'll still be plenty of space here to access that control knob to adjust the shock absorber. Now there are a couple of little, probably not even 1 millimeter shims that are designed to go in there, but for the test fit at the moment, I'm just going to leave them off. So I suppose one thing I've noticed is that, I mean, these brackets do need to be replaced by the manufacturer. They came with holes drilled back here, but the mounting points on the chassis are over here, so I did actually just drill out a couple of holes just to try and get this test fitted. But looking at it, it's not quite in the right location. The spring is actually hitting this plate and the cutout on this side at the rear of the vehicle. So, I mean, for the purpose of confirming that all the parts go together, yes, it works, but I do need to wait to get these replacement lower shock absorber brackets. Just to confirm the clearance on this side, I hope it does shift it across a little bit or further to the front of the vehicle and provides a bit more clearance at the back here. Okay, so I played around with it all a little bit more off camera, but I just wasn't comfortable with where that shock absorber was sitting. It was just rubbing on the inside edge of that cutout. I know that the brackets aren't perfect. They do need to be replaced by the manufacturer, but I was told that it would be adequate just to drill a new hole and use them for test fitting purposes. I don't want to do that. As soon as I lifted the control arms and put a little bit of pressure on the shock, it did just rub on that inside. So I don't want to cause any damage to the components or, you know, take the coating off it, the paint. So I'm going to proceed just without the shock absorbers for now, at least get everything else set up, ready to go. So I'll bolt the upright back in. And we'll then have a look at the rear toe link. I have a feeling that the rear toe link is going to be a similar setup to the upper control arm with the 4 to 5 mil of spacers required each side. Given that it gets mounted with the same end into the same bracket and the same bolt, well, not the same bolt, but same size bolt, or same bolt arrangement. But the manual doesn't specifically say that it needs those spacers. Just based on a rough calculation that I've done in my head as to how many spacers I've used and how many are supplied with the kit, there should be sufficient spacers there. It may mean that there's just a greater number of smaller 1 mil spacers rather than having the thicker 2 or 3 mil spacers. It'd just sort of be a bit of a, whatever's left over can be used in that area. I will confirm that that's the right approach with the manufacturer though. So onto the toe link. The toe link goes in here. I'll just need to change the angle on that. It's basically that adjustment there. Some parts of the bracket just seem that little bit tighter than others, and the rod ends don't quite want to feed through, but you can generally find a place to install them. Okay, I'm going to jump on the other side and try and get this other bolt out, undone and out. I'm just going to go and grab some more of those spacers. I think there may be enough left over for the rear section. Okay, let's see what we might need here. I think I'll have a little bit more play with this one. bet we've got the same issue with the washers not wanting to thread onto the bolt shaft. So same as the upper control arms. The spaces are just there to get a feel for how it all goes together. Once the brackets are tightened up, I'll be able to determine the correct spaces that are required. Looks to me that there's a fair bit of adjustment required there to It's not perfect, but it's a lot closer to being aligned than what it was. And the adjustment's as easy as that. So that's the passenger side all done now. I'm going to now move on over to the driver's side and get it to the same level. Still seems like very little suspension travel in the back there. See how the other side comes together and maybe even compare that to the front if that's what I move on to next. I suppose the reason I've jumped onto the rear suspension, even though I said I was going to start with a lot of the fluid related items, is because I have an engineer that is interested in coming and having a look to do the initial inspection of the vehicle, and they would like to see the suspension put together so they can get a feel for how it all works. It is a very similar setup to the other kits that this manufacturer offers that they're probably a little more familiar with. So it's really just to satisfy them that it is a similar setup. So yeah, that's why I've sort of changed course a little bit. Once I've finished the rear suspension, I will look to jump back into the front and look at the front chassis extension and the cooling system, so back to the fluids. So just before I shuffle everything around to start on the driver's side, here's a quick overview of the suspension setup. As I said, the shock absorber has been removed just until I can get the correct bracket. Okay, so that side went together a lot quicker now that I know what I'm doing. Same amount of suspension travel there. And I suppose I could measure it, but it just doesn't seem like a lot to me. I will have a chat to some other builders and the manufacturer just to see if everything's right. Now what you will see, I did on this one, it's got this rough sort of grippy sort of area on the push rod so that you can twist it to adjust it. And it was just rubbing on the inside of the upper control arm and we're starting to chew away at the aluminium already. So I've just put a hard plastic packer and just taped that down just to protect it whilst it's sitting here just without any support. Obviously once it sits up, hopefully it'll be okay, but I mean, that's already sort of, yeah, I don't know, it just doesn't look right to me. Where it's sitting here sort of feels like where it should be. When I consider the spacing for the bell crank, that's where it needs to be to have just a finger clearance between the push rod and the A-arm, but we're maxing out the bell crank at that point. Confident that I've got all the right parts there. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. We'll see. All right, so here's another close-up of the suspension, rear suspension, all fitted off. So one thing I did note off camera, I just went back and checked the manual and the bolt boxes, and I found that those lower control arm bolts were the incorrect size. I had accidentally grabbed the 3 1/4 inch length bolts rather than the, I think they were 2 3/4 was the correct size. So I quickly replaced them. I also measured the suspension travel from full droop to completely raised, where the bell crank bolt was then fouling on the bell crank bracket. And I had a total of 55 millimeters of travel. Doesn't seem like a lot. Maybe it's right, but I've shot a message off to the manufacturer just to get them to confirm. And hopefully it's all good, because I can't see where I've actually installed anything incorrectly based on the information in the manual. So that's a wrap for today's episode. For the rear suspension install, obviously a couple of components that I still need to resolve once I can get a hold of the manufacturer and get some clarification. Tune into next episode where I will be installing the front extension panels that bolt onto the front of the chassis. There's a bottom plate as well, and that will then allow me to install the radiator and then the hoses that can run through to the back of the car. So that's the plan. If you're liking these episodes, please hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and hit that like button so that I know that I'm on the right track and that you are enjoying the content that I'm creating. Thanks, I'll see you then.